Hey guys, welcome everyone. This is Rough Cuts on October 6th, 2024, and we are coming to you live on YouTube and also on Instagram Live. This is our second show now, going live on YouTube, and we're excited about that. The show will continue to also be available on podcast on both Apple and Spotify. That should be available within a couple days or so. Thank you all for joining us. I see a couple folks are starting to come in here, and we're excited to be doing another episode. We're actually getting a little bit of a rhythm here about once every month or so. So we're starting to settle in a little bit. Matthew, Jonathan, good evening, guys. It's great to see you.
Awesome to see you too, Nate, Matthew. And pleased to tell folks joining that I think we have the technical difficulties a little bit more straightened out this time. I managed to get it streaming on Instagram. Matthew, I hope the same is for you. And our special guest for the episode just popped in, so things seem like they're on track.
All right, perfect. Yeah. We have a fun show tonight. Couple different topics that we're going to be discussing, and as you mentioned, Jonathan, we'll have our first ever guest on the show. He's at the same time a big supporter of the show and someone who's pushed us to keep doing it. And also, Matthew, I think you've rightly said, a little bit of an antagonist to us as well at times, always in a friendly way, but keeps us honest, on our toes.
Keeps us coming back to do the show, right? We're getting pretty lackadaisical about the weeks here. He's the one that's on us, so
yeah,
appreciate that.
That's right. Yeah, so he brought us a really interesting kind of hobby news story that we wanted to spend some time talking about. And then, so we're going to do that first once we bring him on. And then we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about some of our favorite artistic vintage cards. And we'll be focusing on card fronts this time, which we thought would be a good complement to our conversation in our last episode about some of our favorite card backs. And in particular with a focus on aesthetic beauty and artistry, which is something that we're all pretty passionate about. So, and then, we'll wrap up as we normally do with some recent pickups and mail days and closing thoughts. But guys, anything else you'd like to add up front, or should we go ahead and bring on our esteemed guest?
He looks ready to me.
All right.
Let's do it. Yeah, I definitely want to make sure that you guys emphasize your collective legal acumen here.
All right.
We got a few lawyers on the stream, so this will be fun.
All right.
What's going on, guys?
All right. Hey, so this is Chris joining us, Publius13 on Instagram. Chris, thank you for making the time to come on with us. Welcome.
No, thanks for having me on. I didn't realize your first ever guest. I thought I was hyped up a little bit too much in the IG story, so I'm a little bit nervous now. I'm not going to carry my weight here, especially since it's been, like 14 years since I've taken torts. So it was a little bit, I was trying to remember some of these rules over the last couple days when I was trying to figure out what was going on here. But and also overstated how much of an antagonist I am to this show. I think it's been very supportive, got the chat going, really keeping you guys on schedule so that you can build a sustaining pod, and so that next time you can have someone like Paul Lesko on here to discuss this instead of an economy guest like myself.
Yeah, no, absolutely, man. We appreciate you always pushing us to keep going. And so before we jump into the topic, do you want to maybe just tell us a little bit about your history in the hobby and kind of how you collect, and maybe a thought or two on curation?
Yeah, sure. I think I entered the hobby, I want to say informally, maybe around the year 1989 as a toddler. There's some evidence that suggests there were some 88 tops or 87, but we don't know if those were, maybe bought in 1990 or not. I can remember as a young child kind of organizing team sets with rubber bands, in that early junk wax baseball era, like late 80s or early 90s cards. And, so most of the people I collect are still from that era, like MJ, Griffey, Tiger Woods, Barry Bonds, those types of guys. And then also, older athletes that I kind of revered when I was collecting in the 90s, where I would know about Mickey Mantle and Willie Mays. Obviously, I did not see them play personally, but it's similar to probably people collecting Luka today, how they hear about like Michael Jordan. Like those guys were kind of like my Michael Jordan relative to today, I guess. So my collecting is primarily focused on people that I had an affinity for when I was collecting, which was, I don't know, let's say 1990 to like maybe 96 or 97, 98, something like that. So I missed like a lot of, I have a lot of different, what's important to me is different than like most of the high-end basketball collectors, because like the late 90s is when all the really expensive, rare basketball inserts come in. And then like in 03, you have exquisite, but like I don't care about any of that stuff because it was never important to me then. So it's not going to be important to me now. And that's just how I collect personally. So like my collecting is really built on like the foundation of it is the time period that I was actively collecting, getting the cards I wanted then, but somehow couldn't get my hands on, primarily since there was no internet. I'm guessing was somewhat of a hurdle probably at the time. And then, going back to the 70s, 60s, 50s to get that Julius Erving and Wilt Chamberlain and Willie Mays and Mickey Mantle card. And the way I've done it is I've made a list of 90 cards. It's originally 100, but I think 90 is better because my box is 3 rows and 90 is like 10 binder pages, which is how I used to have like my favorite cards in a binder. And we'd always argue in my neighborhood about like, yeah, your first page is better, but like I have a better second and third page because you'd order them like best to worst. And so like I kind of still keep the spirit of like, so I like the idea of having it divisible by the number, like it's like my top 10, it would be like my top 10 binder pages if it were in a binder. Instead it's in a 3-row case, but also fits in there perfectly, 30 cards in each row. So I have a list and I've just, kind of pick those off over time. It's cards and players that were important to me at the heart of my collecting. And then there's a few exceptions made. Like I wasn't in the hobby when Tom Brady was drafted, but I'm from Boston and a Patriots fan. I actually have like a Tom Brady hoodie on right now, this TB12 hoodie. So like for football, I make an exception for Tom Brady and Rob Gronkowski and they were inducted into the case long ago, which is a pretty big honor because I think there's only like 40 athletes and 1 coach in it. So much more difficult to get into the Publius 1390 card case than say something in the Hall of Fame where kind of they let anyone in that place.
Right. And there are some older vintage cards in the case as well, right?
Yeah, and so like basketball, I'm like pretty much done. I have like a couple more cards that I need, but it starts out with like 57 Topps, Bill Russell, then a 61 Wilt, 72 Dr. J, a 74 Walton, the 80 Bird Magic J, and then 81 Topps Bird, and then slowly kind of makes its way in the 90s. Then there's like a few things, post 1998. So, but it really like the heart of it is 80s and 90s, and then stuff that I'd see. I remember in the Beckett basketball magazine, some of the sets they'd have a picture on top of the set, and then some of them they wouldn't, just because it's space prohibitive to have a picture of it. But a lot of times they use the 81 Topps Larry Bird photo for that set where he's in his shooting shirt and it's his first single player card, I guess. I don't know the terminology for that. And so like I always loved, like, so that was like one of the first cards I bought, and that's a no-brainer in the case, even though I didn't own it or collect 81 Topps basketball back in my time. But so it's really it's very nostalgia based.
So
I would
Chris,
say.
yeah. So then, I mean, one thing that we've kind of been talking a little bit about loosely is like kind of the idea of like how big should a collection be, kind of a thing. And I think one kind of version of that is what you're doing, which is to like really like define it as like all the cards need to fit in this case, and that kind of and I think you've said some really interesting things over the years about how that forces you to make tough decisions where it really feels like very like collector driven.
Yeah, I try to like get a piece, like a little piece, like every card should have like a standalone kind of purpose of some sort of, whether it's representing a set or whatnot. I get into the hardest decisions I have, I'd say, are the inclusion of players that I personally like a lot, but I do not consider hobby relevant or historically relevant, versus players I do not like at all, but I think are because I'm trying to. It's not just my favorite; it's also hobby significance, right?
Give us
And
some examples. I want
Marcus
an
Camby
example of
versus
one.
Kareem Abdul-Jabbar is like the most insane example you will probably
That
get.
drives home the point.
That is like an actual real thing that I probably stayed up to like 4 o'clock in the morning the other night thinking about. Like, man, I like Marcus Camby, but like this card in my case, it just sticks out. It doesn't look right when you're flipping through it and you're like, oh, Kevin Garnett finest, Kobe Topps Chrome, and then you see a scoreboard, Marcus Camby, and it doesn't really jive in there. And then you're like, oh, I see you have Bill Russell, Wilt, Walton. I think we skipped somebody. What about Lou Alcindor?
So
And
it's
so,
not, yeah. So it's not just like each card has to stand alone, right? It has to be a consistent. They have to make sense together, right? That's kind of what I'm hearing you say.
yeah, exactly. Like, and then there's like I get it on a card by card basis. Also, like, I have a '93 SP foil Jeter and a '93 SP A Rod. And I think like I don't like Derek Jeter, to be honest, but the card is very significant and he's a important person in the hobby. I think the SP A Rod is probably like his most significant or iconic rookie card.
Mm-hmm.
Like I thought about taking that out since I have '93 first year SP Jeter and putting in like '94 Flair A Rod, because I feel like '94 Flair was an awesome second year Flair baseball set. It was the first year for basketball. Everyone forgets that there's a '93 Flair baseball, but so '94 is the second year, but it was just a much better. '93 Flair is kind of bland. It doesn't have like quite '94. You get the hawk gloves and the wave of the future, and it's a really cool. And I think
even those little boxes, those little boxes in the two.
I opened those one of the first boxes I ripped back in like 2020 or 2021. Trying to get a Griffey hawk gloves was really, and it's in consideration for the Chicago Junk Wax Party. So
I love hearing the way you talk about the hobby, Chris. I've told you many times that you've had a big influence on me as a collector, not for actually bringing any discipline or curation whatsoever to my approach, but just for making me realize what a spaz I am. So I thank you for that.
Well, it's also when I came back to the hobby, one of the other driving forces is probably I was like, I had, binders and boxes and everything. And I was like, if I could do it all back again, instead of having like a binder of 300 Ken Griffey Jr. cards, I wish I had just like gotten like the 5 I want, like, so I didn't want to like do it how I did it before as a child, where I think I focused at the time. It was like how many Griffey cards I had was like the most important thing in the world to me. But I missed out on like a lot of the stuff that I really wanted. And also I just didn't like the I don't know. I don't like all the clutter. It's hard for me. I feel like I never enjoyed them over the years, because getting them out and like putting them on a table was an exercise in itself. My whole collection now is a black Frieza case this big. I can just pick it up, set it down, flip. And I think I just like enjoy them more when they're like consolidated in a case like that.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And we three have talked a fair bit about those concepts as well. And as these guys have alluded to, we're we're thinking about spending some more time talking about it on an upcoming episode. We might have to have you back again at some point. But all right, well that's great stuff, man. Let's go ahead if you guys are ready and jump into our first kind of main topic here, which is the lawsuit between Alt and Beckett Collectibles, where Alt is suing Beckett. Matthew, you wanted to make sure to establish our credentials for our audience. Matthew is the resident physicist here, and will give us the science aspects and approach in mind, and then you're stuck with 3 lawyers in addition to Matthew. So
I'll disqualify myself further. I'm working in corporate governance right now and do not have an active law license.
Oh yeah, okay, all right. And I'm a corporate lawyer, so I'm barely qualified too.
Yeah,
But all of you studied it.
but I got a B plus in torts 1, so I feel
we all
like
have a JD. So
negligent misrepresentation. Turn back the clock here. I feel, at one point somebody told me I understood this. So.
All right, so Chris, what you want to tell us about what's going on with this case?
Yeah, so like I follow Paul Lesko on Twitter, who's like fabulous, and he's some sort of, I think he's like a plaintiff's litigator. So like he actively kind of like follows the hobby docket, which makes him like an excellent Twitter follow, because he'll just post all these cases every day that I've otherwise never heard anything of. But this one particularly stood out to me because a few days ago the court published denial of Beckett's Rule 56 motion. So I started reading into this one a little bit in the history, and I thought it was really excellent. I wanted to get the thoughts of from some other legally educated folks, which is why I brought it up in our group chat. But man, this one's a really interesting one. It's a tough one, but like the fact pattern, as I understand it, the card in question is a 2009 Topps Chrome Steph Curry rookie gold refractor out of 50. And this card was graded in 2016 by BGS. It is a 9.5 gem. Now, the first issue with the fact pattern already, like I have to stop and say, here's the first kind of wrinkle is in 2016, there were, I can't remember if it was, I believe it was 4 of these submitted in total, all by the same submitter. The first 3 were not graded and returned as evidence of trimming. Now, the person who submitted these, who was the submitter of the 9.5 and the 3 subsequent submissions, is also his history of alleged history of card doctoring is easily found on the blowout card forums, shall we say. Now, the problem with that, though, is there is no record from BGS as to the serial numbers of the 3 that were rejected. So it is an argument can be made either way, that it was clearly the same card submitted 4 times, or that this individual had numerous Steph Curry gold refractors, and the first few were trimmed, but this one wasn't. Although now the fact that it's claimed to have been trimmed, I think, is definitely going to make those prior submissions pretty relevant. But anyways, so in 2020, Alt purchases the card on Golden Auctions for $168,000. A couple of years later, they crack the case to take the card out, to submit it to PSA to increase its value, is what they say, which is also interesting. Now, of course, in their complaint, they don't make mention that they cracked it out of the case, but we know they did, because when it got to PSA, it was not in a Beckett holder. But they in their complaint itself, it's interesting how it was graded by BGS, and we took it and sent it to PSA, and leave out the procedure that they had done in the interim, which is mighty convenient for them.
Right.
Anyways, and that's not disputed that they cracked it out. So card gets to PSA. They say it's altered, trimmed, I think on like the top edge maybe, or I'm not sure exactly where, to be honest. Okay, take it. send it back to BGS. BGS also now says there's evidence of trimming on the card. So Alt sues Beckett for negligent misrepresentation. And, legally at this point, Beckett, Alt has survived the 12B6 motion, which is failure to state a claim, and then also a recent Rule 56 motion for dismissal. At this point, the rulings have been like pretty favorable to Alt, I'd say, in that the fact that they survived summary judgment, the court in its opinion on the motion to dismiss for summary judgment said that this is an actionable claim and doesn't merit dismissal, which is what Beckett would have liked to have happened, obviously. And so that's basically the fact pattern, kind of where it seems like where we're at is that it's going to go to an actual trial now with full discovery and witnesses and what have you. But like the things I thought about outside of the fact pattern, like these are like some of the things that just came to mind originally, and some of the things that were noted in the order from the court was that, when we think of grading, the terms of service, right? I think that's like what we'd first think of, like, well, doesn't Beckett kind of like disclaim itself from this stuff in the terms of service? I think in the terms of service at the time, they try to make a statement with regards that this is not for commercial use, and these are all just opinions, and you cannot sue us for any information in here. And like a few problems I think that the court noted were, one, like there's no mutual consent on this, like you don't have to accept these terms of service. Two, they're not just relying on the POP report and the information on the Beckett website. The card itself, which is not on the Beckett website, is in the grade, and the card being in the case at the auction house is enough in itself to that somebody would rely on the grade, right? So they're not solely relying on like the POP report or the grading information on Beckett's website. So the court basically rejected Beckett's claim that, of course, they're experts at card grading. Card grading is super objective until you sue us, and then it's an opinion, and you can't rely on any of this. Right. So, which is par for the course there. And then I also found it really interesting that the court seems to, this court at least, which is the U.S. District Court of Northern Texas, really distinguishes between, they kind of claim that this is outside the scope of an opinion, and whether or not the card has been trimmed is actually like a fact-based statement. So the fact that it received a numerical grade is a statement of fact that it was not trimmed versus trimmed. So if the card had came back a PSA 4, it seemed like this court would not have been able to make that distinguishment, right? Because the grades themselves are subjective opinions that they are okay with, but it seems to really make the distinguishment here of whether it's trimmed or not trimmed is statement of fact, not opinion, which is interesting because is it really though? Because are we able to objectively determine enough, like if it were, I think we'd be able to catch 100% of these.
Right. To us in the hobby, that's not the intuitive result. I feel like, where that's headed. Jonathan, what do you think based on what you've heard so far?
Yeah. And I wanted to provide a little context for the folks listening that aren't lawyers. What Chris just explained is the judge chose not to dismiss the claim up front based on saying that, like, hey, is there potentially a valid claim they're bringing? And the court didn't dismiss it. And then after hearing some evidence, the court also didn't dismiss it on summary judgment. And you might think sort of like, well, so what? It's going to go to trial. That's really where things are won and lost. But if you're in the business of grading cards and courts are saying, hey, there might be a valid claim every time you get it wrong, that's a super meaningful difference in sort of how they think about their business. And most cases like this don't actually go all the way to trial. So if you're a plaintiff's lawyer and you make it past the first motion to dismiss, and then you make it past the summary judgment motion to dismiss, most of those cases at that point in time settle out, meaning the people making a claim get paid. And so it'll be interesting to see if it goes to trial or not. But I just wanted to underscore procedurally, it's a really big deal that a court said, yeah, this might be a valid claim that they're bringing. My expectation would have been that it would have been thrown out based on things that we all in the hobby feel like, yeah, that definitely is an opinion in the hobby, or we've all looked at Beckett and their terms of service. They don't make a guarantee. So it's pretty surprising to me.
Yeah, agreed. And Jonathan, to your point, I found a couple quotes from the judge in the denial of the summary judgment motion. He said, "Thus, because of this superior expertise and because trimming is at least somewhat objectively measurable, Beckett's assignment of a 9.5 gem mint grade to the Curry card was an actionable statement of fact." And he said, "The primary dispute now between the parties is whether the card was in such condition at the time Beckett graded it." Right? So he's basically saying, like, and the thing that comes to mind for me is we always talk about PSA has this guarantee, right? And they say, okay, if you buy a card and rely on our opinion and it turns out to be altered or fake or whatever, then at least in theory, will make you whole. We all assume that the other grading companies don't have that. But this judge is saying maybe all these grading companies, if you're willing to sue them, do need to stand behind at least some portions of the services that they're providing.
Yeah.
Sorry.
It seems,
Matthew,
yeah. I mean, it seems, from my point of view, I mean, we always have all of these endless arguments in the hobby about, like, what does grading really mean? And is it just an opinion? But then the opinion carries so much weight monetarily, right? Like Alt's asking for $350,000 in damages, on a card that they bought for $168K. So, I mean, it's just starting to get, like, pretty serious, monetarily. And it kind of, some of the things that come to my mind too are just like, especially when it comes to these serial numbered cards, you always wonder, like, well, don't they have a record of having graded this object before? And I don't think that they do. At least from the data that I can see, in terms of people grading cards, that, it doesn't seem to be, even though there's a unique identifier, right, for that particular example. So those are just some of this case is really interesting in that it raises a lot of these questions that we debate all the time in the hobby, and who should be responsible, right, if there's a trimmed card gets through.
Yeah.
Yeah, the cracking is interesting because initially my first thought was, okay, they cracked the card out. So, but that's a factual thing that can be, proven in court based on the weight of the evidence. Who does the judge or jury believe actually trimmed the card? Was the card trimmed before it was encased, or was it after it was taken out and submitted to PSA? And that's we can get into like the weight of the evidence there, but it doesn't really prohibit them at all, other than because the negligence was committed when the card was graded, theoretically, and then the reliance was established at the time of purchase. So what they do after that really doesn't, at least legally eliminate the negligence claim or bar them, which is probably why we've ended up here, I guess, as we are, because at first I really thought this would be a much easier case for Beckett. And after having read through it and thought about it a little bit, I don't know that I would not. And
looks like Chris maybe.
Yeah, we lost Chris. I while we're waiting to see if he jumps back in, I wanted to say this. From my point of view, I almost feel like it's the worst possible set of facts for the plaintiffs, meaning like somebody had the card that Beckett graded and like, great, it's worth what it's worth. It's worth whatever the Beckett 9.5 guarantee is worth. And they trashed it, they knew that they were ripping apart the serial number and trashing it and hoping for better. And it's just wild to me that they could do that. Somebody else could get the facts right, and they could go back and hold Beckett accountable. So it's a pretty radical ruling to me, just based on the behavior of the plaintiff. It does look like we have Chris back here. So
Yeah, sorry
Chris, we
about
lost you for a second. So I was tap dancing while we waited for you to get back.
Yeah, not sure what happened there, but my apologies.
Yeah, and you know, and the way the judge is talking about it, it makes me wonder if Alt had tried to cross it without cracking it, and PSA had said no, we won't holder it. It's trimmed, it's altered. Then would Alt like potentially? I mean, they would seemingly have an incredibly clear path to winning this case, right? Because now you have no issue about who trimmed it and, you know, when it happened, and, you know, all that goes away.
What about how do damages work though? Then if there's like, hey, you had a BGS 9.5, now you still like, because they're like, if they send it to the case of PSA, they're not going to crack it out or put, and like the only people that are going to know what the result of that crossover submission are going to be the grader and Alt. So like, has it patently diminished the value of the card? Like, so I was wondering that for like how that, if Beckett will make that arguments with regard to like proximate cause, right? Like, well, why is this card really worth less than what it used to be? Is it because it's trimmed, or is it because it's trimmed and you took it out of the case that used to have a grade associated with it? Because really the primary difference in value now is the fact that you used to have a gem mint Curry Gold, and now you have a raw copy that can't be graded. And you're the ones that did that, agnostic of the fact of why you did it.
Yeah, that's true. And I mean, another impact on the measure of damages is the passage of time and what's happening in the market. And maybe you guys know the answer to this, but, you know, if it was purchased for 168,000 and then in 2022 they claimed 350,000 because the market had gone up and Curry had done well and maybe won some more stuff, and but now, you know, say they win this case in 2025 and a Beckett 9.5 is worth 80,000 because the market's gone. Like, I don't know, you know, when exactly.
Oh, you mean in terms of damages? Like, yeah. Oh, that's interesting.
But, you know, this potentially has some really tough implications for the grading companies and, you know, potentially by extension us, you know, if that means the cost of grading is going to go up more. Do the grading companies need to start getting insurance if Beckett loses this? I mean, in any other case that's at all similar, if Beckett loses this case, obviously this is going to be the first precedent that gets stated, and, you know, it really could impact the grading landscape a bit.
I think so too. One, it feels like this won't be the final word legally. You know, this is kind of opening up a discussion, and it feels like there's a lot more law to be written. But yeah, I think you can imagine repercussions that would be better for the collector if grading companies stand behind their grades and if Beckett adds a guarantee. But you can also imagine the reverse, that they feel like their cost structure has to be so much higher because they could be, every time they grade a six-figure card, it's a lot of potential liability for them. So it's going to be interesting to watch.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. Matthew, any other thoughts on it?
No, I'm ready to move on to some.
All right.
To some punching.
Yeah, sounds good. Well, Chris, yeah, thank you for presenting that and, you know, helping us to talk through it. And, you know, before we let you go, we know that you have engaged with us quite a bit in the past on some of our Rocking the Boat segments. And we wondered if maybe you had anything you might like to present to us tonight. And for those that are checking out the episode, the Rocking the Boat, which we haven't done in a couple episodes now, but that's typically when we talk about something that we find to be overrated in the hobby. Sometimes it's been a player or a set or an aspect of the hobby or whatever, but the most controversial ones tend to be a player. So Chris, do you want to rock the boat tonight?
I got a bunch, but I'll keep it to one. I have nothing but inflammatory remarks on this piece of paper in front of me, and I kept it to players because I felt like it would be most hurtful to those that cheer for these people. But all right, I'll give you my overvalued. And this is, I determine it based on my basis for value is the card ladder player index market cap. That is what I use for a standard of value. Okay. And my overvalued is Derek Jeter.
Nice.
Nice.
And here are my reasons for this. In the card ladder player index, the two people he sits between in terms of total market cap value are Kareem Abdul-Jabbar and Wilt Chamberlain.
Oh my
Who
God.
I feel like are much more accomplished athletes than Derek Jeter, and also in more expensive sports. So it's kind of like insane that he's in the vicinity of those two. And Derek Jeter's 7-year peak WAR was 42.4, which is less than the average Hall of Fame shortstop, which is 43.2. It's less than Nomar Garciaparra, who is 43.
Noma!
And it's about 2/3 of A-Rod's 64.3. So I think Kareem Abdul-Jabbar and Wilt Chamberlain is a lot to spend on the guy who is the third best shortstop in the American League in the 1990s.
Nice. You brought the heat, man.
Yep,
This
that's a
hobby's
strong argument.
the hobby's love affair with New York Yankees knows no boundaries.
Okay.
Many of our featured overrated folks have involved Yankees, I think. Guys, any reaction to?
I'll tell you what, we talk a lot about the fact that collectability is different than just pure on the field performance and statistics, and baseball collectors love talking about WAR and things like that. It's hard for me to say anything in favor of Derek Jeter because I am not a Yankee fan, and he's a University of Michigan guy, and I'm a Buckeye, so I'm not in his corner. But there were a lot of things about the guy that made him incredibly collectible and just a celebrity as well. I mean, I'm even remembering the duo. I don't know if they got married or not, but he for a while he was dating one of the Sports Illustrated swimsuit models, and she was all over the news. He was all over they were just sort of like,
He's an all-time
Marilyn
stick man,
Monroe,
like,
Marilyn
for sure.
Monroe and Joe DiMaggio, that kind of a thing. And the guy was just for a while larger than life. But yeah, you can spit all over him, Publius. I'm not going to defend him.
So the first thing that came to my mind actually was, one of the great topics with respect to Jeter is, how do people evaluate his fielding? And so I'm assuming that the numbers you quoted were Baseball Reference
Yes.
wars. Yeah, I would be curious to know what like Fangraphs is, because they do different. They analyze defense differently between the two. I would be curious to know because I think that Fangraphs uses a little bit more like advanced fielding stats, and I mean I mentally think of Jeter as not a very good fielder, so that would like swing it in my head, at least how I think of him with respect to A-Rod and Nobar. But then of course comparing him to like Kareem and Wilt is kind of like, that's kind of ridiculous.
One of the things on the celebrity is an aspect of collectability, obviously winning, and he did an awful lot of that. And then also, the kind of, sense of sort of class and professionalism that he had. It's, a lot of people like to collect people that they feel like they, sort of can identify with in a really positive way. And Chris, I think this might be someone else that would be on your overrated list, but Kobe, it's, I think, another one of those people where like there's an element of his personality that people just really connect with very strongly, that, has him clearly collected ahead of his career accomplishments and where he stands in the all-time game. But yeah, Jonathan, it goes back to your point, and and Chris, what I think your focus is similar to what we've focused on when we've done this in the past as well. And Jeter is a tremendous example of it in terms of just like looking at the numbers and like, man, how is this guy have so much action?
Yeah. Before I go to my undervalued, then I'll since I removed my Kobe's, I was actually gonna a little hot and cold with him. I did make it on my Kobe note here. I think to your point, I think he's actually undervalued from a cultural perspective in the hobby. And relative to LeBron, when I say that, because his total market cap, it has approximately the same number of cards as LeBron, but only 60% of the total value. And I think that Kobe is as loved, if not more loved, than LeBron, regardless of, like, if we ignore merits of them as basketball players. And I also think I see way more Kobe Bryant collectors than I do LeBron James collectors. So from like a collectability cultural perspective, I think Kobe is actually undervalued a little bit. I think he should be closer to LeBron and Jordan based on the love he gets. But having said all that, now as an actual NBA basketball player, I find it appalling that his market cap is 13 times that of Shaquille O'Neal's, who was Finals MVP for 60% of Kobe's championships, and that Kobe is in between in market cap Tom Brady and Willie Mays, who I'm not quite sure that he has the on-field resume of those two. So culturally underrated, merit as a player greatly overrated, and I think that's a fair assessment of him. But then I'll give you my to cap it off, my undervalued base, and it's a baseball. I brought some baseball guys because I know this. I know 56 Tops guy doesn't want to talk hoops too much, so
He loves MJ.
My undervalued is Barry Bonds, and Derek Jeter's market cap is 2.5 times higher than Barry Bonds is, which is kind of another shot at Jeter. While I'm here, I might as well take another shot at Derek Jeter, but I think is insane. And although I say this ironically, tonight I got grossly outbid on PWCC. I'm going to call it PWCC. I don't care. Bonds card that was up on their weekly auction ending tonight. So maybe the tides are turning here, since I was like, oh my gosh, it's Barry Bonds is going to go so cheap, and I did not win the card. But here are the 4 baseball players ranked just ahead of Bonds in terms of total market cap. And it's appalling. Really, this is insulting to the game of baseball, the 1990s, my childhood. And anytime I was watching any kind of TV in 2001, 2, 3, or 4, where they would stop what you were showing to take you to a live at bat of Barry Bonds. And I want to know if any other baseball player is ever that good, because I think the answer is no. These are the 4 people ranked just ahead of him in terms of market cap. Ernie Banks. Well, I mean, yeah, I mean, we have 25% of the.
What's your point?
I see no issue here.
I should have skipped over that one. Juan Soto, Ronald Acuna Jr., and Ricky Henderson. Now, do those guys really seem like they're in the same vicinity of a player or as memorable as Barry Bonds?
Fair, but in this hobby, you have to consider scarcity in the time that the guy's rookie cards came out, and you couldn't possibly time coming into the hobby as an all-time great like Bonds worse from a scarcity perspective than rookie cards in 1986, 1987. And I think that's the reason. I mean, that's certainly the reason vis-a-vis Acuna and Soto, who have one of ones and gold refractors and all that other crap.
Well, and the obvious likability that there are just a lot of people that don't want to spend $1 on Bonds, right? Because they just really dislike him for any number of reasons, which I'm sure that is quite a drag on his market as well.
Never proven.
Yeah, the other thing I think about with Bonds is I know that his stuff has been going up a lot because there's been so much attention on like the 90s serial numbered stuff, and I know that like people have been viewing Bonds as like a place that it's gonna increase a lot, so I think the values have really gone up a lot more recently, at least in that list. I think of like mentally I'm like, okay, Soto and Acuna, we're 10 years out from now. I would be surprised if those numbers didn't fall. I think that Henderson's an interesting one. I mean, I think Ricky's actually pretty undervalued. like for how good he was and the impact that he had on the game. Of course, yeah, I mean Bonds obviously had a massive impact with just his pure talent level was undeniable. Yeah, like very unlikable, but pure talent was just insane. Like if you go to that YouTube video and watch like the one him versus Gagne, right? And that famous there was that famous story where I think they were both in Japan together. And this is when Gagne was like the hot shot reliever, and they were doing something in Japan, and Bonds was like, I want to see what you got, Gagne. I want you to come at me with your best fastball. And they kind of came to an agreement that if they ever came into a game where it was like, okay, the score didn't matter if Bonds hit a home run or not, that they were gonna that Gagne was gonna try to throw like fastballs by Bonds. If you should check it out on YouTube. It's like one of the coolest things because like all of the players from both teams are all up on the dugout to watch this random at bat in the middle of the season. It's really cool. Yeah, it's super cool.
Nice. Yeah, that's awesome. Well, Chris, you have been a phenomenal first guest. We've really enjoyed it. I think the discussion about the lawsuit was very interesting, and it'll be really fascinating to see how that plays out. And loved hearing some more. I learned some more about how you collect, and you definitely brought the goods on rocking the boat. So great stuff, man.
Thank you guys so much for having me. It's great seeing all of you. Also.
All right,
See you,
you too.
buddy.
We'll talk soon, man.
Take care. Thank you.
Chris.
Take care. All right. Well, that was a lot of fun. That was really cool. We will.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, we'll definitely have to have some more people on soon. Chris did a really nice job. So, all right. So moving into our next segment, which is our focus on artistic cards and some of our favorite examples of those. Jonathan, you did a very fun add yours story post on Instagram a week or two ago that focused on this and helped bring this topic into our collective attention here. Do you want to maybe talk a little bit about this one to get us rolling?
Yeah, I mean, we all talk about the artwork of these cards and how much the aesthetics matter to us. And I thought it would be fun on that post in particular to do some mashups of like, hey, let's look at beauty and let's just separate it from value. And I know there were some quite valuable cards I included on that post, but there are also some cards that might be worth 25 cents that I included. And it's just fun to look at the cards for the art. And I thought, so I think the plan is we're going to do another lightning round. We each brought some, we're going to show 4, but if there's duplicates, I have some backups to show. And I'm going to cheat right from the get-go. So I'll show my first one right here. The Bowman sets of the early 50s are just gorgeous. And by the way, I'm trying to show cards I didn't include on that post. This is a card that I just got from my PWCC vault. This is a 1952 Bowman Duke Snyder. And this is it's probably not one of the top 5 collectible cards in the set. But my goodness, the colors and the artwork, and it's so fun. And I'm showing it next to the Stan Musial, which I wouldn't be surprised if one of you guys was going to show. But you see these 2 lefty sluggers from the 1950s, and the line work and the colors and the illustration of these cards, they're just beautiful. These are not $1,000 cards; these are $100 cards. And if you just want to look at something that's has some amazing artwork and 70 years under his belt, these are some good contenders right here.
Really nice. 52 Bowman is so clean. It's just so clean. Like you said, the line work, it's just beautiful images. I love that set so much.
Yeah,
Very
that's
cool.
a great pick. Matthew, I didn't think we'd hear any objection from you to some early 50s Bowman.
No way. Yeah, I would love that stuff.
Do you want to go next, Matthew?
Yeah, sure. I'll go next with I'll bring this guy to the stage. This one is a classic for me. So I'm showing the 1951 Bowman Roy Campanella. So when I think about like beautiful images on a card, this one always like leaps out to me because I have a thing for like these catcher cards where they've got the gear, the color looks amazing, and it's just such an amazing photograph that turned into just a beautiful piece of artwork. And I think similar to Jonathan's cards, this is also obviously early 50s Bowman, but also not that expensive. It's not as rookie, but it's just a gorgeous card, and I would highly encourage vintage collectors to chase that one. It's definitely one of my favorites.
I knew you'd show that one, or Nate. I left it in the box because I was like, they're gonna hit that. Also, if you see the original photo of that, it's much wider angle, and even the cropping of it is part of the artwork to just nail that design on it.
Great call. Yeah. Matthew, I had forgotten you had that in an SGC7. What a great example of that card you have. That's so nice.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I saw it and I was like, wow. And I remember seeing it. I forgot how much I bought it for, but I remember thinking like, that's a stupidly low number for such an amazing example.
Yeah.
So had to snag it. Yeah. Thank you. Thanks, guys. Yeah.
Matthew, I think that's one of the first cards that we, I don't know exactly what the right term is, but maybe bonded over. You know, like very early on when we started talking and hanging out on Instagram, we both like kind of, did a lot of recognition of how much we both really enjoyed that card. And so for several years, you and I have mutually enjoyed the beauty of that one.
Yep, for sure. Yeah, those catcher cards, man, they're cool.
Yep, absolutely. All right, so my first choice is the 1934 Diamond Stars Lefty Grove. So this is the number 1 card in the Diamond Stars set. And this example is an SGC3. And it's, I think, I don't know, a little bit of an under-discussed, maybe a little bit of an underrated card. It's a tiny population. It's only a little over 200 of them in the PSA pop, which is, I'm not sure if it's short printed. It was weird kind of how they made these cards. Some were made in 34, some in 35, and some in 36. And I think with the Lefty, it came out in 34 as the number 1 card and maybe some in 35, but there just were not a lot of them made. But it's got, just kind of the classic Art Deco lines and coloring, and, with the shapes and the colors on this card are just so perfect, in the way that they hit my eye. And Matthew, to your point about catcher cards, I brought a little addendum or corollary on that one, which is the Jimmy Fox card from the same set. Had to do it. So, showing Jimmy. Jimmy, I think, was mostly a first baseman, but played some catcher, and this great Diamond Stars card happened to catch that. I like the Lefty card a little bit better in terms of the overall design, but but showing Jimmy in his catcher gear with a really neat and colorful background, I thought was pretty cool too.
Man, that one's high on my list. I'm hunting that card. Love it.
Awesome.
All right, I'll go next. This one might seem a little out of left field or center field. I'm holding up the 1960 Topps Mickey Mantle All-Star card. I could have picked any of the All-Star cards from this set. And I actually don't think these get that much love compared to 58 and the 59 All-Star cards. But this is the horizontal issue for folks that are on the podcast. It's got the 6-0 in the background, blue and orange. And then this kind of profile of Mantle holding the bat. And I just think it's the most classic design. I have a whole binder page of, I think there were 12 in the subset. I've got a few of them graded, but my daughter and I completed this set, and there's something about the look of the horizontal card. I just think it's a beautiful example of the 1960s design, and I get this card out and stare at it all the time. This is when I bought raw and got graded, which makes it extra fun.
I love the design aesthetic of those 1960s set, but also the All Stars. I think they did a magnificent job on that set.
The Banks is really nice too, of that All-Star card.
Definitely. All right. Next one up for me. This is also one we've talked about this one recently, but I just gotta show it again. So I'm showing 1914 Cracker Jack Fred Clark. We love the Cracker Jack set, and of course, such beautiful designs in that set with that bright pop of red, instantly recognizable. Love the big like Cracker Jack ball players at the top. But this card in particular is a really, it just signals so much to me of like just the simplicity of baseball, especially like the old time game with him like using the bat as a chair. I just think it's such a cool card, and another one that instantly comes to my mind as like just very aesthetically pleasing. Could easily see it like being hanging up in a gallery, because it just says like old time baseball, right? It's just so cool.
No, I have huge love for that one as well, Matthew. Just a great choice. I mean, all the Cracker Jacks with with the beautiful red backgrounds, and particularly the ones that show, some of the green and red contrast. I think the coloring is phenomenal. The art on the Cracker Jack cards, for me, there's some pretty broad variation, because there actually are a few of them that I don't love, like, and just for me, but like the Tris Speaker card, like I feel like it makes him look sort of a little gooberish, kind of almost like he was this tremendous athlete and tremendous fielder, and like, I just kind of don't like the way he's portrayed. And there are a couple more like that, but the ones that they got right, and I think that, for me, that's the vast majority of them, are so good. And that's so clearly one of them. It's just that, yeah, 1,000 miles there, or what's it called? 1,000 yards there. I don't know.
Yeah.
He's looking off forever in this, like, just such an iconic pose with the perfect background. It's awesome.
Yeah.
Looks
Good
like he
take.
wears
I
about a size
agree.
14 as well.
Yeah, his feet do look huge.
Nice. Well, man, I was tempted to do a Cracker Jack as well, and I'll show the one just really quickly that I had here, but I'm gonna cheat and not count it, and that's the Walter Johnson card. I really like
That's amazing.
the full length poses, from the set as well. I think they really captured those nicely. So that and the Lajoie are two of my favorite full lengthers, but the Cracker Jack had to be well represented in this from my perspective. But I'll go with a card that I'll be very surprised if I get any pushback on, and that's the 1948
There he is.
Leaf
Yep.
Ted Williams. Yeah, that I think it would hurt our credibility if we did this segment and didn't show this card, right? Like this just kind of has to be there. So this one is a PSA 4, and I think it's a card that we all have a great deal of love for, and I think would be a hard one for us to imagine not having in our collections. The 48 Leaf set, some of them in particular just kind of scream that pop art sort of look. And, the Williams, and then the Spawn, I think, the Spawn maybe more than any really screams pop art, but the Williams is just kind of the perfect pose, beautiful background, the great interplay between the red, the baby blue, and the white. Again, looking far off into the distance, just, wonderful image, wonderful coloring, great set overall. So
I had a feeling you might show those, and I was looking at the timeline of Andy Warhol. I didn't realize, but his portrait of Marilyn Monroe, the 4 different versions, or the Chairman Mao, those came out in the early 60s or mid 60s.
Yeah.
And so these cards, I think they could be on a museum wall right next to those Warhols, but it shows you these were part of the design aesthetic in the world when Warhol was growing up, and he was seeing images like this that influence his art. But I think, I couldn't hold those cards in higher esteem. Those are some of my favorites.
Great point, Jonathan, about Warhol and the timeline. Yeah, that's really interesting, and it makes you wonder: did he see them? Right? Like, did they potentially influence this great artist in this art movement? I don't think there's a clear answer on that, but it's certainly possible.
Totally.
I think the other thing that does it for me in the design, I just love the big block lettering at the bottom with the name. It's just so like strong and punctuated. I think it's so cool. And I when I was looking through my cards, I'm like, oh, I would love to show this Williams. And I'm like, but Nate has such a killer example. I got to just get out of the way and just let him show that thing, man. That example is insane.
Nice. Good call on the lettering. That makes a big difference on a card,
Totally.
and they really nailed it. It's the perfect complement to the rest of the design on those.
Yep.
So I'll try to be fast on this next one, but I think controversially, early 50s Bowman football have better art than Bowman baseball, and the baseball are amazing. So this is the 1950 Sammy Baugh. The line work on this, I know Nate has one. This is a gorgeous card. But here's a common from the set too. In the commons, there's all of these shots, I got it upside down, that show people kind of close-ups of people in action. This guy looks like he's doing the Heisman pose. I want to put together some binder pages of the commons from these sets, because if you just look through 1950, 51, 52 Bowman football, almost every card is just so fun to look at, really colorful and action poses. So take a look at this.
Great call,
Cool.
Jonathan. Yeah, I love that card, and it was your daughter that really got me focused on that one at the
Yeah.
National a couple years ago. Did she get you?
Yep.
How about you guys? Did she get you focused on it, or because she has a great eye for beautiful cards, and
This is not her card. She bought one raw and it got a
yeah,
5.5 when we sent it for grading. And I
Wow.
was like, I need my own. It wasn't good enough that she had one. So I went out and bought my own.
she influenced both of us. I love it.
Totally.
Very cool. All right, I'm gonna go a little bit more modern with my next two, actually. So here is man, this is a killer set. 1984 Donruss Ryan Sandberg. This is a card I've talked about this card on Instagram a lot. If the 1984 Donruss wax packs were cheaper, like that would be what I would bring. That's what I would want to bring to our next like rip night at a national, because it's just a killer set. Of course, it has the Mattingly, which makes it like really expensive. But there are many cards in this set that just look amazing, and I think that the Sandberg is one of them. It's my favorite Sandberg card, and it has this cool photography technique where he's really well in focus, but then everyone in the crowd has got like kind of turned into like looks like a little kind of donut shape. And there are many cards in this set that have that same photography technique, and I just think it looks super cool. So that's my third one.
Yeah. The degree to which Donruss stepped up their game from 83 to 84 is remarkable. And I say that as someone that has, I think, more appreciation for the 81 through 83 Donruss sets than most people. But that leap, I'd be curious to know what happened at the company during that period, because you're right. I mean, that set is, it was interesting at the time to us because it was so much more rare than the Tops and the Fleer sets for those of us that are old enough to remember when those came out. And it was the scarcity, but now with some more time and, some more seasoning, it's the beauty and the artistry of that set. And that Sandberg is such a perfect example of it.
Yeah, it's a cool card.
Yeah. Yep. All right. So, I'll go with another, kind of obvious slam dunk here, and got the 53 Bowman Pee Wee Reese, and, I think, if I had to pick just one card that to me just screams artistry in the whole hobby, I think it would probably be this one. I mean, this one just looks like, a little version of a painting, right? I mean, I just can't look at this card and not think that they, so perfectly captured the action, the horizon, the horizontal movement, the, again, the color and the shading and shadowing on the card is perfect. So 53 Bowman color has some just, phenomenal cards, and it's known, it's one of the sets from that era that's really known for its aesthetics and its artistry. And I think this is often considered to be chief among them.
Absolutely.
And in classic Nate fashion, it's like the most amazing low grade example. It just it's enough to make you feel rage, but what a beauty.
And that's a case where a design, there is no name box, right? There's no name anywhere on the front. It's just an image, right? And it's just it just jumps out at you. It's like such a cool card. Love
Great
that
call.
one.
Totally clean image.
Just clean. Yep.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the image is all you need to tell the story.
Yeah.
All right, for my last pick, I'm going with another common. This might be a $30 card. Maybe not in this grade. I'm showing a 1933 Gaudy Glenn Spencer. This is the commonest common in the set. You look up this guy, he was a pitcher. He might have had like 21 career wins, 23 career losses. It is the most beautiful work of line art. And I think that, you can tell if you study the set, there was a handful of different artists. And I think this is the same artist that did the green Babe Ruth. I saw this. It's a beautiful centered PSA 5. And I just fell in love with it for the way it tells the story about what baseball meant back then in this young pitcher. And I love the fact that you can buy a card like this for maybe $30 and have something that's been, I mean, I don't know how many owners it's had, 3, 30, who knows? But it's such a cool thing about the hobby that you can have these little treasures for well less than I spent on fast food last night. So 33 Glenn Spencer, folks.
Nice, very nice.
Great call, man. And yeah, 33 Gaudi had to be represented. I mean,
It's just
it's just the gift that keeps on giving when you look at that set. Like you said, I mean, these treasures just buried throughout that set. And, I mean, you look at that with fresh eyes, and it would be such a fun set to own, because every time you leafed through it, you would be like, oh my God, I didn't realize how beautiful this card is. It's just, so deep.
very cool, very cool. So with my last one, I'm going to go with one that's like another one in the line of the 53 Reese, the 48 Leaf Ted. I would be remiss if we did not include a card from T206, and in particular, the one for me that I always think about is the T206 Ty Cobb bat off shoulder. I think that this really is like artwork on a card for sure. You got like what's really cool about this card is if you get a well registered one, you can see kind of the smokestacks in the background, which kind of really denote kind of like Industrial Revolution era America, right? And he's got the 1,000-yard stare. He just has that. You can just see the like seething competitiveness in Ty Cobb in the image, and just the colors. I mean, it's insane, right? That they produced this in that time, and it was mass produced and distributed in tobacco is literally like shocking. So I had to put that one in, just had to. So we got Tony. Yeah. Tony is giving me props for my Sandberg, which I appreciate.
Nice. The color work on that, and the transitions from one color to the next, and the number of shades that are represented on that card are just unbelievable. I mean, even within the yellow and orange section in and of itself, there's like 4 or 5 different shades. And I mean, it's an entire rainbow with a beautiful image up front. And man, I know it took you a few tries, but you really nailed the reg on you referenced the reg to see the smokestacks. I don't know if that's what was your driving force or not, but that thing is sharp.
That's a one of one, man. That card you're holding right there, one of a kind.
Yeah, it took a while to find it, but yeah, really happy with it. Really happy with it.
Nice. So the portraits, I feel like a good portrait card kind of gives you a little bit of a feeling when you look at it, or conveys a mood or whatever. So I'm going to show just a couple kind of quickly. And so again, from the 33 Gaudi set, the kind of angry Melot, I feel like is a fun one.
Love it.
The 52 Topps Monty Irvin just captures this like vivacious energy and athleticism that just jumps off the page. And then this Satch from 53 Topps, I feel like is such a cool card. And, so it's such a foundational building block, I feel like, for so many vintage collections. And part of it is because of, I feel like, the mood and the vibe that it conveys. And to me, it's like a pensive wisdom almost. Satch is like in his mid-40s there. And what he's seen and what he's been through and what he's done and the stories he's told and the stories he's lived. And somehow this art really conveys a lot of that. And to me, makes it just, a really wonderful portrait as a result.
Well said, Nate. Yeah. I've always thought like the choice of the image that they used for that card, I can't imagine they could have done anything better. Like you get to see his age, you get to, the sense of kind of like wisdom, the kind of wily character. I mean, it's just it's a really perfect card, really is.
And my somebody watching the Instagram live, my buddy DKV 2.0 said, you also see the kindness come through on his face, and I've always felt that too. And even when we listen to the Black Diamonds podcast and listen to Bob Kendrick telling old stories about those guys like Satch, the kindness and the joy come through in those stories. And I do, it is a reason I love that card, is you can see that on his expression in his eyes.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
Yeah. Awesome.
Well,
Classic cards, man. Classic
yeah.
cards.
Great stuff, guys. Jonathan, great idea. Thank you for bringing that to bear. And this was as fun as I expected it would be, and might be something that we need to bring back at some point.
It's
But
all about the cards, right?
It is.
That's
It
right.
is.
Our typical last segment. Do you guys have any parting thoughts, any recent pickups, or any mail days that you would like
I'll
to?
do a quick one. I recently, and I did a reel on this from Instagram, but I unloaded I'm still going to call it my PWCC vault, and I'm not sure I'll do it again. I'm a little disgruntled about the change in management. So, but the fun thing about that is a card you bought a long time ago, you got a validation on, and you finally got it in your hand. And I'd been looking for a pretty long time for
man.
a Bob Gibson rookie, 1959 tops. It's this amazing pink card, which is pretty rare, with a young Bob Gibson in this circle. It's a PSA 5.5, and I bought it at auction, sent it to them, and they called it exceptional, which didn't surprise me. And I finally got my lifetime copy of that card, and it was fun to stare at it in the vault for several months, and then finally wait for the right time to send it home to me. So this one's I've been enjoying it on the desk, and I'm sure I will for a while.
That's a card I know that the Iowa Dave, he would love that one. I know that's a big card for him, and
Yeah.
it is tough to find an example of that card that's like nice color, well registered, well centered, not
Yeah.
easy.
You did so well with that one, man. That is a beauty. And yeah, Matthew, that's absolutely that's one of those cards where you have to look at least 100 of them. There are so many things wrong with them, and you want the color just right. Jonathan, I feel like the biggest thing when you get it in hand is how does the color look, and it's so important on that card. How does that hit your eye when you see it in hand?
It's better than it did even in the scan. Sometimes the scans, especially the way PSA does it these days, they're a little washed out, and that the pink has like some purple tones in it that you really appreciate in hand. So yeah, it's fun to have.
Yeah, awesome.
Very cool.
How
Very
about
cool.
you, Matthew?
Yeah, so I'll post the recent pickup that I got up here onto
Let's
into
go.
this. So here's 1986 Fleer MJ in a PSA 8, and
Who says you don't like basketball?
exactly, who says? And this is a bit of my reaction maybe to the Star 101 melodrama that's happening in the hobby, right? So I had a pretty nice. I had a PSA 7 MJ that I traded in the Mantle deal. So I knew I needed to get one at some point, and big fans of the Star 101 like to say that part of the reason they like the card more is that it's just so much more rare than the 86 Fleer, and this is a junk wax card, so like it's there's a billion of them. But I challenge anybody to find like the fraction of cards that are actually well centered of the 1986 Fleer Michael Jordan. There's very, very few of those cards that are well centered, and I found this one just kind of randomly in an auction on Facebook, which is kind of a ridiculous place. I wouldn't recommend doing that for many card purchases. But I found this one, and when I saw the image and I saw how well centered it was, I was like, oh my God, this is just very recently graded, and just impeccable centering. And I just was like, okay, that's the one for me. I needed to have one of these in my collection, and I was so happy to find it, and I'm just thrilled with it. And I look at it, and it kicks any desire out for the Star 101 out of my head, because that card does not compete with this. It just doesn't. You can talk about the rarity or whatever until you're blue in the face, and I'd take this one over it any day.
Nice, man.
Gorgeous.
Yeah,
Gorgeous.
I'm glad to hear you've been enjoying it so much since you got it in the mail. I know you took a little time to find the right one, and you ended up stepping up and getting just a phenomenal copy, and that's neat that you've been keeping it close and really enjoying it. And yeah, and the Star, like, the other thing I'd challenge people to do is show that to 10 people who aren't in that, show both cards to 10 people who aren't in the hobby, and ask them which ones which one they'd pick. And I'd be very surprised if it's not 10-0 or 100-0. I mean, maybe you use scarcity as as a tiebreaker between cards that are somewhat close, but they're just different levels, I think, to each of us.
Yep.
So,
Good point.
Yep.
All right,
Great
bring us
choice,
home,
man.
Nate.
yeah, that's awesome. Well, so the remarkable element about my card that I'm going to show is the recency with which I obtained it, which is within the last hour or so. So,
Oh, wow.
I
You got it.
Yeah, you
Oh,
guys knew I was
cool.
bidding for it. So it's the 1932 U.S. Caramel Rogers Hornsby in a SGC 2.5 that I
It looks
just won
amazing.
on the PWCC Weekly. We all agree we're calling it PWCC, right? So got it on on their weekly tonight. And this one has been toward the top of my list for a while. It's again, kind of artistically and aesthetically, I think my favorite Hornsby card, and I've wanted to have him represented in the collection. He doesn't have that many really nice cards. This one's a tough one to find. It was toward the top of my list at the National this year, and I didn't see a single one at the entire
wow.
show.
Yeah, me
Not
neither.
even,
Wow.
yeah, not even like not the right copy or too high grade or whatever. I just didn't find one in the room. So I've had a couple near misses, and finally, I put in my max bid before we started tonight because I knew I'd forget otherwise, and I got it for exactly my max bid. Now,
Good on you.
keep in mind, these auction houses don't know what you bid, so it's just pure coincidence. But
I can't believe you found an example of that quality. That example looked insane. Like, perfect card for you, Nate, in terms of
Thank you, man.
grade and eye appeal. Wow.
Yeah.
So nice.
Thanks. I really appreciate it. Yeah. And and it's fitting to end this episode because it really is the art on that card. And that's another one for me that's, a little like the Cracker Jack set, in that there are some cards in that set where I don't really love the likeness and sort of how they depicted the player, but I thought they really nailed Hornsby, and with the other attributes from that set, that seemed like the right fit for me. So
Congrats, man.
yeah, thank you guys.
Well
It's
done.
been thanks. A lot of fun. Do you guys have any last thoughts before we wrap up? good.
Let's do it again soon. This has been a lot of fun.
Absolutely. Thank you guys.
All right. Night,
Take
everybody.
care. All right.
Thanks,
See you
everyone.
guys. All right.
See ya.
Bye-bye.